cute. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. We have a very, very special show today. And they're all special, but this one is near and dear to all of our hearts. And I'm talking to Andy Hayes, and he is from PLUM Deluxe Tea Company. And tea, as I just said to Andy, it's not just the drink we have, which it is, but it is an invitation to relax. It's an invitation to come forward, sit down, and it's a beautiful thing. So, hello, Andy.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It is just my pleasure. I was telling Andy a little earlier that he had sent me some teas, and right now I am porch sipping pecan black tea, and sit on a porch anywhere. This is what it says on the package: relax and enjoy. So this is tea as the great meditation, the way to relax.
Mm-hmm. Don't you think it's really interesting? We were just talking for only a few minutes before we hit record. I mean, we covered like 2 or 3 really intimate moments in your life that
Yes,
tea was a part of. And I think that's what's so magical about it. It's this one word, 3 letters, but then it has just so many combinations that seem to figure out where they're supposed to be and support us how we need supported in these different moments, like
exactly.
sitting on the porch with conversation with a friend, or really worried about something happening tomorrow and needing something before bed to try to like instill your inner mind, or something in the morning because you're sleepy and you have something really important to work on. I just think it's so magical. I don't think even I, before I became a tea maker, appreciated how it has such depth.
So how did you become a tea? Yes, you're 100% right. It does have depth, and it's very different than drinking coffee, which we all love or don't love. But I stopped drinking coffee when you sent me some samples, and I did. And I
I
thought,
get that a
well,
lot.
Port, really? Do
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Wow. I have Portland Rose City Chai, and they're all so special. And I have Queen's Blend, which I'm glad I have, green tea, and then I have gingerbread chai tea. So before we get into these, which we're going to, by the way, the name of this company is PLUM Deluxe. So you can, while you're listening, you can go to PLUM Deluxe and look at some of these amazing blends. But Andy, how did you get in to making tea?
Well, most people who work in tea say the same thing that I do, and that tea found me. That's it's just very common. I don't know what's the story about that, but for me, yeah, tea found me. So I ended up, after I got out of school, living in Europe, and I have an IT degree. So yeah, I don't have like a food science or food service type
Right.
education, but I was working over there, and I lived in the Netherlands first, and I ended up living in Scotland after that. And I just fell in love being, an American, fell in love with like the tea culture there.
Oh,
Obviously Europeans, we all know, who are Americans, like their pace of life is much slower, and they have a real appreciation for cozy things. A lot of European languages have their own words for things that are cozy or small. Like in the Dutch language, there's even a way to make a noun small. So a mug or a small mug, they have different letters, different way you say it. So I just found that like so fascinating and just so
yeah.
enriching and vibrant. And it was just amazing. And also the flavors of the tea. I grew up with like 2 pitchers of iced tea in the fridge. One had sugar and one didn't.
Right.
And so that's all I thought
Right.
tea was like another caffeinated choice in
Yeah.
selection. My parents drank a lot of coffee. My mom was very attached to her German heritage, but wasn't like a huge tea person or anything. It was just that like Lipton type thing. So I was just blown away by like white teas and green teas and, pomegranate and roses. I mean, there's just like so many things. It just seemed almost overwhelming, but it was not overwhelming. It was whelming. I felt like it was just like a rush of
Oh,
so many things. And I thought it was fascinating. So the long story short, to answer your question, I ended up moving back to the States after living over there for quite some time, almost 15 years, I think.
oh, wow.
Um, and I sort of had a existential crisis, I guess, career crisis. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was kind of tired of working in corporate. Um, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if I really, I mean, I was very good at the IT jobs that I had, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep doing that. So I was just kind of dabbling, as you do. I mean, that's how if I feel really stuck, I just kind of wander a little bit and see where I end up. Like, you know,
Yes.
like I'll do a little bit of this or, just say yes to things as they come up and see what
Oh,
happens.
okay. I'll try that. Yeah.
Yeah, like how bad could that be? So
Right.
anyway, I had at the time, because remember I'm a computer person, so this is very helpful. I had a blog. I had been blogging about a lot of these things that I had enjoyed living abroad. The appreciation for the small moments and just the adventure, life, having adventures in life. And back then, it was very popular for bloggers to have like those Google ads, for you
Yes.
just get paid without having to do anything. And I was like, this would be so cool if I could do this. But this is like a pittance. It's not even paying rent or anything. It's just not enough money.
Yeah.
Um, and someone said to me, like, well, you could sell something, like you could put products on there. Like, what if you had products or something? So I was like, oh, that would be really cool, but I don't know what I would sell. And I was like, what would pair with like adventures and, talking about like mindfulness and these, different perspectives on life. And I was like, tea, like that would be kind of cool, but I don't even know like what that means or how to do that. And here's the funny thing that where serendipity happened, two things happening at the same time. I came up with this idea, and I had actually been working with this freelance writer who was helping me edit blog posts and like upload photos. And, you have
Yeah.
a podcast, there's like a million things that go on in the background to make these things
Right.
happen. And this person was working at a tea cart, like a food cart, but
Yes.
a tea cart on the weekends. And I said, I would love to do this thing. Like, would you ask your boss if she would help me? And they were like, oh, that's a great idea. Sure. And so, sure enough, this woman said yes, she would help me get into tea. But she wanted me to send her my ideas, and she would, based on what
Oh.
she saw, if she thought they were good or not, she would help me. So I sent her my 4 or 5 ideas of teas, and she said, these are genius. I've never heard of anything like this. I will help you get started. Now, she had she had bought a matcha farm, which seems
Oh
kind of
my
weird, kind
gosh.
of random, but she was actually going to end up getting out of tea kind of and going to matcha. So it was perfect because she wanted to kind of, I guess, she wanted to leave something behind, I guess, in that space. So she taught me everything I needed to know to get started. And here I am. Now I have my own warehouse and I have my own employees. I have a couple of tea makers that help me make the tea because I mean I need to sleep too. Yeah. So it was all just kind of a bit of serendipity, and tea just kind of found me. If I had not
Oh.
had those adventures, and if I had not had this person randomly working with me who had a tea side gig, like it might have never happened. So I mean, maybe it would have. I don't know. But I think it's so interesting, and I find many, many, many people in the tea industry have very similar stories like that. Just something magical happened, and poof, there they were in the in the tea business.
Wow. How long ago did you start this business?
Uh, fi- it's now been about 15 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh
been a
my.
long time. Now,
Yeah.
it was a very slow, I think, just to temper anyone's expectations, these things. It's a very slow start. I was very slow. Took my time
Yeah.
getting things established. And then of course, as you start to get one thing going, then you have more momentum to get the next piece and the next piece. So I think for me, I didn't have any food background. So it was a lot of learning like how to, and I'm making air quotes here, like manufacture food. A lot of people don't think about their food being manufactured. And it's not that tea is like this fake thing and made in a lab, but there's a lot to it, like the moisture and the temperature in which it's harvested, and the combinations of different pieces, the acidity. There's like a lot of things that you need to think about, and it's kind of a lifelong study to integrate all that.
But yours is so natural. I mean, you have every single ingredient listed, which I find so interesting. I mean, I feel like I know you, number one, because this packaging is so wonderful. But I mean, just for all of our listeners, is this honeybush tea, cinnamon, orange peel, ginger? I mean, when you talk about moisture, to get all of these diverse things to be at the same quality is probably really a hard thing to achieve.
Yeah, it's a bit of a science for sure.
Yeah, I can see this. And this one has caffeine. So what would you suggest? I'm just going to keep adding these things in because my listeners honestly and truly respect the fact that we have the best thing in mind for them. And this is that in terms of tea. I can almost tell you, Andy, that I can taste every single ingredient. And the porch sipping, I can taste all the things that are in there. And it's such a pleasure to just sit and taste this. It really kind of calls you back to maybe to Europe or to people just relaxing. It's okay. But what would you say if someone goes to PLUM Deluxe, they should start with? Is there a starter set or something?
There is, but you know what? If you are on our site and you click under the shop for tea button, there's a quiz. And I think that's always kind of fun to take. You don't have to put in your email or tell us how tall you are or any personal information like that. It just asks you 4 questions about how you tend to like tea, and it gives you some ideas of what to try. And we do have quite a few flavors now. I think we have over 150, which is a lot from starting from 4. And we have a lot of seasonal teas. So I always think those quizzes, even though sometimes they're a little gimmicky, can be a great way to just get your mind going about something that you might like. Otherwise, if people are coffee connoisseurs, I always like to mention hazelnut. I live in Oregon, and this is like the filbert capital of the world. Most of your hazelnuts are from here. And hazelnut does kind of ring like coffee. You notice a lot of flavored coffees are hazelnut flavor. It's a very popular flavor.
Right.
It kind of makes the coffee just taste better if it's cheap coffee. So that's always one I think about for the coffee people. But then if you don't drink coffee, if you just like tea, you can either like look for something that you've just never heard of before, like the Portland chai is like a very kind of random.
So good.
Yeah, it's very unusual. I love the smell of that one. I'm just addicted to the smell
do.
Of it. It smells so interesting.
I opened it up and I'm going to do it while we are talking. I do like the Queen's Blend and all of that, but the Portland, here it is. I mean, Portland Rose City Chai, everybody. And then there's Gingerbread Chai. So and I'm going to smell it. So
yeah, and while you're doing that, it's blackberry and rose and cardamom, lemongrass. Yeah, it's so interesting.
Lemongrass is a great addition. Almond and it says love, gratitude. Oh, that is.
Yep, we try to sneak those in when the our inspectors allow it. Sometimes they don't.
When you write love and gratitude?
Yeah, because technically it's not a real thing, but we all know it is.
Are you making more? I mean, more flavors? Because these are, I mean, I'm just, with just the ones you sent me, I'm busy, busy, busy.
Yeah, we don't do as many as we used to. I feel like we have a nice
I think
selection.
so.
Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. And what we do instead is try to think of any, like we listen to our customers. We have a very vibrant community, I feel like, of people who drink our tea and who share it online. And we listen to what they want and try to include things like seasonally, especially like we have a lot of people doing iced teas now since it's so hot everywhere during the summers.
Yeah.
So we've been doing more iced tea flavors in the summer. It's a nice way to stay hydrated.
I said to Alexa yesterday, I live in New York State, and I said, Alexa, what's the temperature? And she said 0 1 degree. And I thought, oh my, oh my. A lot of people like think of tea, iced tea, but there is so much to sitting down and relaxing and have a cup of tea. We're allowed to do that, aren't we?
Absolutely. And even if you feel pressured for that, just the 3 minutes while you're waiting for the water to boil,
Right.
like just take some deep breaths. Like that, that's very helpful.
It is.
You can get more done if that's your objective, if you just take a breath for a second.
You really can. The breath is a really important thing. It's just take a breath. If all else fails, someone said, see a stop sign in front of your eyes and just stop and then take a deep breath. So I have a question. You had talked about matcha, and I actually have matcha here and I love it. But I think of tea from Asia. I'm not familiar with tea from Scotland. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What kind of teas come from Europe?
Yeah. So first of all, let's differentiate that word tea. Tea has really become a word for something put into water and infused. But if we want to get technical about it, there's a plant called the Camellia sinensis plant, and
Okay.
that is the traditional tea plant. So when you think of black teas, green teas, yellow teas, oolong teas, white, I'm not sure, white teas, any of those are all from that one plant, and that's how it's processed when it's harvested. That you get the
Really?
different kinds. Now, honeybush tea, rooibos tea, which are very common for herbal teas, but then think like hibiscus tea, chamomile tea. Those are all flowers, botanicals, herbs. And so those
Right.
are herbal teas, but that's not using the tea plant. So the more correct term for that is a tisane, which is the French word for herbal tea.
Yes, I've seen that and I never
Yeah,
knew what that meant.
yeah, that's all it means. But I do want to emphasize though, there's nothing wrong with just saying you're having a tea and it's a chamomile tea or a
Right.
lavender tea. It's totally fine. We
Right.
don't need to get too upset about what word we're using. But just so people know, if you really wanted to be technical about it, you should say tisane if it doesn't have Camellia sinensis plant in it, and if it does, you can say tea.
I
Now that,
see.
yeah, now back to your question about locations, that tea plant grows predominantly in Asia, like that's where it's from, right? China, that's where the tea kind of was found, quote unquote. But now there's a lot of tea grown in Japan and a lot of other Asian countries. But also we have a lot of tea now coming from Sri Lanka, India, and in Africa. So Kenya, for example,
Really?
very large tea producer. Hmm.
Huge.
So the traditional way that tea was spread around the world was the Silk Road. And if you think
Uh,
the Silk Road went from China overland towards Europe, right? So it would have been to the Roman Empire area, and then up in Europe. And to this day, most tea from China goes from China over the Silk Road to ports in Germany to go to the United States. They end up on the
Still,
East Coast. They end up over by you. Still, it's so funny, but it's just it's just an old trade that not much has changed in that regard.
that's so I mean, that's not anything that I would imagine. I don't know why, but I just wouldn't imagine it. Um, I went to Nepal for a month and I went to a retreat and it was really beautiful. And I
I
looked
imagine.
out for it was just beyond my
To die
expectations.
for, yeah.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And there were plateaus, terraced gardens, sort of. And I said, "What is that? It looks like tea." They said, that is tea."
Mm-hmm.
So even
Mm-hmm.
there, I mean, people are growing tea. I guess
Yeah,
in America, we're growing tea. I don't know.
we are. There is one plantation that has a sizable amount, but there's even smaller ones. Like even here in Oregon, there's a small one. They don't produce very much, and it's a very fickle process, from what I understand.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of those places only have enough to sell, for a season or something like that. Um,
So when you say that all the white tea, the green tea, it's all the same original plant, how do they how did that all happen? That people would get that plant and make a white tea?
yeah, I think it's just like I was saying about my journey. Well, I would have one thing, and then we kind of would give us to the next step for the next thing. And so that's how I think tea evolved as well. They had the first teas were like the black and the green teas. Green tea being not as oxidized, not as processed, and black tea being the most oxidized, the most processed, which is mostly, when we say oxidized, it's really like drying it, but
Right.
oxidized technically because it's a little more involved than that. And then someone realized that the tips of the plant, the leaves on the very tip, it's this saying, two leaves and a bud, that those were like really flavorful. Like someone just happened to accidentally kind of figure this out. And that's how we get white tea, because it's just the very top and it's very delicate. So it's fairly lightly oxidized. And then people were worried about the longevity of the tea. So someone was like, well, what if we ferment it? Like maybe it would last longer. And so that's where you get the oolong teas. They figured out that if they fermented them, they could be stored on a rack in a cave for a long time.
Oh my.
So yeah, so I think it's just a process of evolution. Like just slowly people figured out these different things. And as tea became more popular, more people were trying different things, and they were like, oh, hey, what about this? We could smoke it. It's delicious.
Yeah.
They just come up with different things over the time. And that's what happened in Europe. You had these teas flowing through, and the Europeans are so gastronomically orientated. So they'd have these lovely teas, and they're like, oh gosh, this tea would be so lovely with some blueberries in it. Or
I
what if
see.
we had roses? Or that's where the flavored teas kind of found their niche, because of all these pairings with food and different. In Europe, there's people sitting on cafes like every hour of the day drinking tea, and so it's like, what could we do that would make people more excited or interested, or stimulate conversation? That was the
Right.
big thing in Europe. The Europeans really think about like conversation starters and invigorating the mind. And so that's where like, what if we put these herbs in them and spices?
Exactly.
And then you go all the way up to Scotland and England, which has a very strong tea culture, and it's cold and wet and the water is hard. And so you get these breakfast teas that like just stave off the cold and stand up to milk and sugar, well. And
Yeah, I
so
wanted to ask you about that.
yeah.
There's so much to talk about. But milk and sugar was because those teas were more hearty.
Yes. And
Uh-huh.
also the black tea, and specifically the tannins and the proteins in a black tea bind really well with milk.
I see.
Um, yeah, people who like milk in their tea like really like it because it's just there's a kind of a combination happening there, and it has an actual thing. The milk proteins and the tannins and the polyphenols in the black tea like combine, like they actually like do a thing together.
Wow.
So I think that's really interesting. But obviously, um, when people started doing that, they didn't know that. The only things that they knew for the longest time were like um, we needed teas that were very like malty or robust because our water's hard,
Yes.
or or has a lot of minerals. Like
Yeah.
especially people living in the far north of Scotland, like you're probably having a fire for your kettle, so you're
Yes.
getting a lot of minerals and mineral content in the water. So how do you overcome that? You need a very robust, like you were saying,
Yes.
tea. And so that's why those teas became very popular. And then those tea companies started making like those breakfast blends that would include teas from a certain place that stood up well to mineral content. So
Wow.
so there is a lot of like stories in history that are why Scottish breakfast black tea, for example, has these particular types of tea in it, or English breakfast tea. There's actually really little historical quirks as to why those things happened.
That's really interesting for me to hear that because English breakfast tea is quite hearty. I mean, I like it. I like it at any time of the day. So,
And I don't love milk in my tea, but I will say those teas are fantastic with milk and a pinch of sugar. Like they're very robust. Yeah, like very invigorating. Like I picture them thinking of how we live here in America. Like like especially for you, you plowed the driveway of snow. A cup of that tea is perfect after that because you're cold, you're a little dehydrated, you're kind of annoyed because you had to do all that work.
right.
It's perfect for a reset. So,
Well, we ate outside my when my family came and we were sitting outside and we had like one of those heaters from a restaurant, an outdoor restaurant, and we had some lunch. And then I said tea, and they said, "Oh, that's a great idea." And I made tea, and I mean, actually, I gave them the gingerbread chai tea, because I think it's a showstopper, just that everything about it. It's a cold day and chai and so forth. I remember, but anyway, they loved the tea and they loved the idea. And so I just had the kettle like going in the hopes that they would want that. But
mhm.
I remember going to a store in Manhattan, and it's an Indian store. And I said, "Do you have chai tea?" Was so stupid. I mean, it's a combination of things, really. And he
Mhm.
said, "Well, we have the makings of chai tea." And all the things we just don't know about tea. You're telling us
Yeah,
right now.
yeah. Well, and chai is another really great example of the words that we use. When people say chai now, they're usually just talking about tea with spices. So,
Yeah.
for example, the gingerbread chai, is it a classic chai? It's not, because it's not very spicy. It's not super spicy.
No.
Um, the tea that you would get in India, for example, if you order chai, which by the way is the word for tea in India
Oh,
as well,
really?
it would be quite spicy and also sweet. Um,
Yes.
but traditionally, chai, or another good word for it is masala chai, is quite spicy. It has cloves and lots of ginger and cinnamon, so it's pretty spicy. And now we have a lot of different palettes of people interested in tea. So it's nice I think, to have other choices like this gingerbread one that's like got this honeybush tea that's a little sweeter than
Yeah.
a black tea. It also doesn't have as much caffeine,
Right.
that tea, but then the spices are not so crazy. So you're not feeling like it's going to upset your stomach, or if you have it too late in the day, you know, you're going to
Right.
have heartburn or something like that. So
What about turmeric? I drink that as a tea that has, it has honey and you have to put black pepper. Does that fall into any, is it medicine or is it tea?
yes, I would say yes.
Oh,
I'm a huge turmeric fan. Helps me with my joints.
yeah,
So I'm a big turmeric fan, and you do need to take it with the black pepper. It's something about how it makes sure that your digestive system doesn't just send it on its way, but you want to get it into your system.
right.
And the black pepper helps induce that.
I
So
didn't,
if you're looking at a tea, like a turmeric tea, you definitely want to make sure, or a turmeric pill, even if you just want the pills to take after you eat, you want to make sure it does have black pepper in it.
I really like I like turmeric tea or whatever I make with it. I like the smell of it, everything about it.
It's
So
nice.
what,
I like it with a little maple, so it's not so biting. Sometimes it's like quite
oh,
intense.
'cause it is, it is.
Yeah, so I like maple. I don't normally put maple in tea, but sometimes it's just the thing.
Is it maple or not maple syrup?
Yeah, maple syrup, just a little dab,
Oh, oh,
because it's
that,
quite sweet. You don't need very much. I don't like my tea to be too sweet. So
oh, that would be wonderful. So you've been doing this now 15 years and it's
yeah,
successful and you're happy and it's not corporate.
yep, yeah. I mean, like everyone, the 2020 era has been very challenging.
Yes,
Keeping people healthy and happy.
right.
And then now the supply chain situation, which has been weird for some time now, but now a lot of people know about it because it's in the news a lot. Definitely is not fun,
Mm,
but you know, I feel like we're all going through something difficult together. Like if you live on Earth, you're part of this situation, whether you like it or not.
on
Um,
earth, it's not this
it,
country and it's global. It totally is.
yeah, so I'm grateful to work in something that helps people. You know, a lot of people, we've had a lot of new people to our community because they have been looking for something that helps them just center and kind of deal with this constant stress of all the things going on and be a little more healthy. I can't tell you how many people I know have cut out Diet Coke and are drinking tea now.
I
Um,
understand.
yeah, because you just feel like, you know, like this has been a bit of a wake up call for a lot of people that I need to take better care of myself. What the heck am I doing? And this is just an easy, you know, tea with all these great options. It's easy to make, you know, see how that can help you.
I remember I lived in Nashville. I lived in the South for a while. And my mother was from Arkansas. And my mother, she knew iced tea with ice and a lot of sugar. And they called it sweet tea. And I don't know that I ever could find tea, iced tea that wasn't sweet down there.
Hmm.
They call
Yeah.
it sweet tea. I mean, it just, it is what it is. But someone, I told you a little earlier is that I have a friend and he said he wanted Splenda in his tea. And it just seemed like, no,
Don't do
no,
that.
no, don't do that. Please don't do that. So again, we're talking to Andy Hayes and he lives in Portland. You're from Portland.
Yeah. Portland's changed a lot over the years, though.
Has it? How?
Yeah. It's, I remember Portland, there used to be like empty lots, like little patches of grass here and there. And now it's just, they're putting in houses and apartments wherever they can find one. It's just like
Really?
crazy. Yeah. And then definitely the pandemic, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of restaurants gone and things like
That's
that.
sad.
So yeah, it's very unfortunate. I hope that it'll just regenerate, but we just got to get through this one patch, rough
You
patch.
just have to, it seems like, I agree with you. It seems like this is, for me, I hope, the last, we might get this again next fall or whatever. But hopefully there's nothing coming down the way and we can just have a sigh of relief. I feel so grateful for so many things as a result of all this.
I know, I feel the same. I obviously wouldn't wish it and want it to happen,
No.
but that was out of our control. And I feel like I know I personally have really appreciated and learned a lot about the things that were important to me. And I felt like I was a person who was in a position of influence to help people or remind people about the things that were important to them. But then being trapped at home most of the time, that was like a real wake up call as to what was important. So like, you know, here, the last summer was all about like hosting people outside, and
Right.
like how we can figure out how to do that. I mean, I know I've seen so many cool pictures of people's garages that are now like outdoor living rooms. And
Oh,
what
that's
that
cool.
what that reminds us is that it's the conversations and the connections and the those things are really important. I also have two best friends who live in LA, and I used to never see them because I don't really like LA. I don't go down there very much. And during the pandemic, we started having Zoom happy hours. They were like, oh, like let's have a glass of wine on Friday nights, like once a month. And it is so enriching. I love that so much. And even if the pandemic didn't happen and I could go see them, I still like this like happy
I
hour
like that.
format. So it just was like a huge wake up call of like, you know what, like these connections are important and it's important to figure out how to make them happen, no matter what's in the way.
At Christmas time, because last Christmas, not this past one, but the one before, I'm out in Rhinebeck now, and I had lived in New York City really that was my home. And people came by to each other's houses and brought cookies, and everybody brought something to somebody. It was so nice, a mug, this, that, but just everybody remembered everybody. And I don't know that it would have happened if we hadn't all just, I think we missed each other.
Yeah, I also feel like we have a much stronger relationship with our neighbors now. Like
Yeah,
I live on, it's not a dead end road, but it's kind of like a road that like loops around and back, so it doesn't really go anywhere. And so
yeah,
there's not, and then there's a couple of rental apartments, but then here on the end, kind of tucked away in this little nook, there's two houses. And I'm in this one, and then the last one on the street is this other couple that lives next door.
right,
And we've always kind of looked out for each other, like, with porch pirates and
right.
just it is, like we're just on like this kind of dead end part. So it's just, if anything weird's going on, we just keep each other in the loop. But the last 2 years, we are like fierce neighborhood family. Like we have been currently doing this thing where we're trying to beat each other on the gifts we can leave in each other's porch. And we both have those doorbells that record movement.
Oh,
So it's
right.
like, how do you sneak onto the porch without them knowing? It's so funny. But like it's so enjoyable to like, be at home and like, oh, we're gonna make something, and like, oh, we could make some for the neighbors. Like we can just do an extra batch of those
Right.
cookies, and or oh, we accidentally got 2 of these magazines. Oh, like what if we put it with those cookies and see if the
Right.
neighbors want to try it. It's like such a joy to have
Yes, it is.
rediscovered that. And I feel like my whole life I've lived in these cool places and I never really know my neighbors. I
No.
was always a bit of a loner. I, knew people, but I'm an introvert, so it's easy for me to be like, I'm cool, I'm good, I'm just gonna,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
I got a movie ready to go. I'm gonna be inside.
Right.
So
Right.
it's been such a joy to like rediscover like, oh, we can like be friends with people and have a really fun relationship with just the neighbors.
And they're as giving to you, they mean it.
Yeah.
They really mean it. So I agree with I agree with what you're saying. I want to make sure everyone understands this is, I mean, while you're listening, you can go to Plum Deluxe. How did you come up with the name Plum Deluxe for a tea company?
Well, a lot of tea companies have the owner's last names. And I don't know, I don't want to say
Yeah,
that's pretentious, but I just didn't,
no, I understand.
wasn't my cup of tea, pun
Right.
intended.
Right.
And I knew, being technologically savvy, I was going to focus this really online. If you think just even 10 years ago, like to now, the way we shop online is very different. So I was really thinking about it had to be, easy to understand. And I remember the advice back then, which is still good advice if you're trying to start a business, is you want people to be able to say the name of the thing on the phone or on the radio and someone would remember it or be able to hear it.
Right.
So that's, I was thinking about those things, and then I needed the .com to be available. So that actually is the hardest part. If you want a
Oh, right.
online company, finding the .com, because that's what everybody expects, is really difficult. I struggled, and I had this huge list of like ideas and themes, and I was in a mastermind group with other people who were starting a business, and one of the gals was like really creative. She was like an artist, and I said, I'm so struggling with these names. I said, but one thing that strikes me about your work is that your art is very colorful. And I said, I'm really drawn to like the words of colors. Like as a kid, I loved the names of the Crayola crayons, like periwinkle and cornflower were like my two favorite colors, because I just want to say those words like all the time.
Yeah.
So I said, would you help me with this? And she was like, oh, I would love to. Like, I would love to. She's like, send me, share me the doc. I want to see it. So I shared her the doc, and she came up with it like right away. And the funny thing was, she picked plum, which is a fruit and a color, which I think is really interesting. And then you need another word. So deluxe, right? So something fancy or, just nice. But the thing I just thought the plum, like every time we talked about it, it had something else to reveal. Plums used to be a very lucky, prestigious, it was like a fruit that had a lot of emotion attached to it in China, which is where tea comes from.
Yes.
And then if you think about a plum, like it's purple, and then you open it up and it's orange, like it's totally different on the inside. And so it just seemed to have all these metaphors to it. And I was like, we have to go with the plum. Like, we just can't not do it. So that's it. I knew I wanted like a color. That was what I wanted. And that ended up being plum.
Plum Deluxe,
Yeah.
It's a plum job, a plum this.
Yes, we don't say that much anymore, but that used to be a common, phrase to say something just like lucky or perfect or just the right thing at the right moment. Yeah. So I'm just trying to, and sometimes people, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes people are like, why don't all the teas have plums? And, I'll be like, well, actually, if I had known, that might have held me back. A plum tea is actually hard to make. I feel like it's really hard to make because plums are so watery and yeah, they're just hard to get it into tea.
And I don't know that their taste, I don't know.
It's not everybody's favorite too. Strawberries are easy, watermelon, very flavorful, not, much easier, but blueberries.
What about, I interrupted you, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, like elderberry. Do you use elderberry a lot?
Yes, I love elderberry. I have a great farm that makes us wild crafted elderberries. And a lot of the herbs we use are wild crafted, and I'm a big fan of them because all that means is they plant and they try to do as little to it as possible. They just let it do its thing. Now, obviously, we have climate change. They have to do a few things. Obviously, they're pulling weeds and stuff like that, and trying to put up fences so that everything's not eaten. But the wild crafted fruit in particular just has just a delicious taste. And the elderberries in particular, most people who are listening to this who have had elderberry will probably say something like, it's very tart or it smells like socks. And these things are not untrue. But the wild crafted ones are much more palatable, I think. And of course, they're just full of all the nutrients and immunity goodness that you want. So we use them a lot. We even put them in, we have little honey drops that I have a baker make for me. And we even put them in those because it's just like, how can we get more immunity? Like put the elderberry and all the things, like,
oh, that's
give
a great
it
idea.
to us. Yeah, so you can put the elderberry in like a tea that doesn't have it. Like if you have a favorite tea and you want a little honey in it, just put the elderberry in it.
Oh, so tell me about that. I didn't see that. So these are honey drops that you drop in your tea?
Yeah, I mean, you can have them as a losenge,
I would, yeah.
but yeah, you can also just put them in the tea and they dissolve. What I like about them is they're like kind of a pre-portion. So if you don't want it, if you're worried about like putting too much honey in, it's just a little bit. So
What a good idea.
yeah.
Tell me about these tea communities. It
Well,
seems that you have community in with your company, people who enjoy your teas. Is it a community?
yes, I think that's one of the things about Plum Deluxe I'm the most proud of is the relationships that our customers have with each other. So when we started, uh, we thought I thought it would be cool to have a way for the people that were customers of ours to interact with each other. And so we set up like a newsletter and and a Facebook group, like just kind of the basics. And that's all it is still. But it has just grown into this like network of friendships that is incredible. There's a group of four that they call themselves the Calamity Gang because they all have mugs from this company called Calamity Wear, and they meet online every month, and they have for like years. And they become
Oh,
like the bestest of
my.
friends. And people send each other cards. Like I know we in the office got maybe 200 Christmas cards because people exchange Christmas cards. They do gift swaps. People look out for each other, like if they're having a hard time, with pregnancy or losing a
Whatever.
parent, or just people go through things in life, and it's just a super supportive group. And that's something I'm really proud of. The fact that um, all of these people who I am sure have very different political beliefs. They live in very different places in big cities and rural we have a lot of people that drink our tea that live in the middle of nowhere because there's no store with nice tea, so I have to buy it online. And they
Oh,
all come together and do so cordially. We have no issues with any of the typical social media things you would expect with the drama and the
right.
disagreements. We just have very little to no of that, and people just are super supportive. And I think it's just because tea people are usually really good people.
I think you're right. So I hate to tell you, but we have to go soon. So I want everyone to understand that we're talking to Andy Hayes. He founded and he is the man at Plum Deluxe. If you haven't gone on to their website while we're talking, then do it when we're done. The teas are fantastic, and you're listening to him. He has such a rich knowledge of what he's talking about and such a love. I mean, so much of what we buy is just stuff. And this is just, isn't it time that we had something that was, like he says, a lot on the ingredients. He says love, he says gratitude. And these honey drops, that's the first thing I'm going to order. But I just Plum Deluxe, and then we're going to go on that website. And then there's also a community. I think a lot of our listeners would just love that. I would.
Yeah.
Oh,
I did want to leave you with something that I was thinking about your podcast name.
oh,
Yeah. When I first saw it, Dessert Course of My Life, um, you know what it made me think of is a long time ago when I was living in Edinburgh. I went to a comedy show, and it was, it's about this woman. It's like a woman doing a show about her life. She'd had a very rich life, and so she was doing this kind of comedy show. Because most people, once you're of a certain age, you can kind of look back, and most of your life is kind of entertaining. Even the difficult parts, you're like, haha, like
right,
that wasn't so bad.
right.
And she ended the show with what the thing that she learned about life was to keep your fork. And that's like this saying about like keep your fork because like in this case like the dessert, like you want to save a fork because they're going to have good dessert. So when I saw the title of your show, I that was the first thing I thought of was that phrase, which I don't hear people say very much, but I really like it. And it's just this
I
kind of idea of
love that. Keep your
keep your
fork.
fork because
Oh my gosh.
something great is right around the corner. So
So there's Isaacson, Walter Isaacson. is a great writer, and he did Steve Jobs. I mean, Steve Jobs said only Walter Isaacson's going to do my my biography, and he recently did one on Leonardo da Vinci, and someone said, why did you write about Leonardo da Vinci now? I mean, why didn't you do that in the beginning, when you first started? And he said, because I saved Leonardo for the dessert course of my career. And that's
Wow.
where I picked that up, because this is the dessert course of my life. And yeah, but keep your fork is the same thing. Oh, that's
Mhm.
so interesting.
Yeah.
Andy,
And
this has just been the most wonderful time. Again, it's Plum Deluxe, and you're in Portland, Oregon, and we're on the other, I say the best coast. What did I say? It's the best coast.
you said I was on the other coast, and I said yes, the best coast.
The best coast. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I don't know what to say. This has really been wonderful, wonderful. And everybody go to Plum Deluxe and get yourself some tea and change your life and enjoy and relax. Maybe I'll see you on the Facebook page.
Yes, I would love that. We'll have to
Okay,
see have
thank
some
you.
follow-up conversation about this
I
podcast,
think
which
we
I agree
will.
was fantastic.
Right. This was
Thank you
just
so much.
fantastic. Yeah, thank you as well. All right, everybody, go have a cup of tea from Plum Deluxe. Bye.
Bye.